Today on Naturally Crafty, we're making a piped cushion cover with a zip. Here's what you'll need. The main fabric, a cushion pad, some fabric for your piping, some piping cord, scissors, ruler, a set square, optional, some pins, some clips, also optional, a zipper. First, take your cushion pad and measure it. Add 3 centimetres to the width and length of your cushion pad. This is to allow for the seams. Now take your measurements to the main fabric to work out where to cut. I'm using a pattern and I want to centre my pattern right bang in the middle of the cushion pad. So I'm going to work out where is the middle of that pattern, find the halfway point of my measurement. So my measurement's 42, I find 21, place my ruler in the appropriate place, mark top and bottom. Here I'm just marking with pins. Now I use my set square to make sure I cut the corners accurately. This part is optional, you can do this by eye. Repeat for the back panel and cut out both pieces. Now take your piping fabric. I'm using a contrast here, but you can use the same as your main fabric if you wish. And we're going to cut some strips for the piping on the diagonal, just to make sure that there's a little bit of give. I'm using 4mm cord for the piping, so I'm cutting a 5 centimetre strip. Make sure you've measured around the 4 sides of your cushion to assess the length that you need. Once you've cut out your strips, you may need to join them to get the desired length. So place them right sides together at right angles, and then we're going to sew a diagonal across the corner. Once you've sewn this together, push the seam open so it's nice and flat, and then trim off the excess. Now we're ready to put the piping together. Before we do that, make sure you have the correct foot on your machine. You can use a dedicated piping foot, or you can use a straightforward zipper foot. Take your piping cord and place it on the wrong side of your fabric strip. Fold the 2 halves over so that they meet. Place it under the machine foot and sew as close to the piping cord as you possibly can. I like to mark the crease with my finger just so I can see exactly where to sew. This gives a lovely, neat finish. Now to trim the piping to the exact measurement of your seam allowance, you're going to measure 1.5 centimetres and cut off the excess. Now we're going to attach the piping to the front panel of your cushion. We're going to make the join at one side of the lower edge. Line up the piping edge with the edge of your cushion so you have the same seam allowance. Make sure you use the piping foot again or the zipper foot, and sew. Stop sewing before you get to the corner and make sure you put the needle down into the fabric to hold it while you make a few snips to help the fabric travel around the corner nice and evenly. Make the first snip 1.5 centimetres from the bottom of the fabric as shown, and then a couple of snips either side just to help the fabric ease around the corner. Be careful not to cut your stitches. Now take it really slowly around the corners. It's best to do 1 or 2 stitches at a time, and as you do 1 or 2 stitches, pop the needle into the fabric, lift the foot, turn the fabric, foot down, 1 or 2 stitches, lift the foot, turn the fabric until you're back on the next run of straights. Once the edge of your piping is back in line with the edge of the cushion, keep going, keep sewing, repeat. When you've done all 4 corners and you're back on the side where you started, make sure you stop well short of where you began, because now we need to join the 2 pieces of piping. Before we join the two ends of the piping, we just need to trim them down. So trim off any excess piping that's sticking out, and then just gauge an overlap of sort of about 3 to 4 centimetres. We now need to undo the stitching on one of the ends in order to trim down the white piping cord. Once you've undone enough of the casing, you want to snip this piece of white piping cord exactly at the point it meets the one on the opposite side. Turn the end over and wrap around the other piece of piping to form a nice, neat join. Pin or clip this together ready for sewing, pop it under your machine and just sew slowly and carefully over the join. Now for the zipper. Separate the two halves of the zip and place one right sides together on the half of the cushion that does not have the piping. Make sure the teeth are facing towards the main body of the cushion. Make sure your zip is long enough to allow a little bit of excess at each end. Pin in place, ready for sewing, and then attach the other half of the zipper in exactly the same way to the other face of the cushion. Because I'm using a patterned fabric, I'm attaching my zipper to the bottom of the cushion. Now attach each one using your zipper foot. Just make sure you sew really close to the teeth. Now lay your cushion pieces right side together, lining up the zips. We're going to attach the pulley. This bit can be really fiddly, so make sure you take your time. Most importantly, make sure the two sides of your cushion are lined up as exactly as possible. And then we're going to cut a diagonal on one end of the zip, starting on the fabric edge and going down towards the teeth. This is to give us something to pull on when we put the zipper pulley on. Now carefully line up the teeth in the zip pulley. Use one hand on the tabs that you've cut and the other hand on the pulley and join together. Pull it all the way along just to make sure it runs smoothly. Now pull the zipper back a few centimetres just to make sure you've got somewhere to turn your cushion through when you've sewn it together. Now pin and sew around the remaining 3 sides of your cushion. When you do this, use the piping foot because you're going to be going over the piping in the same way you did before. And when you get to the zip, flatten the zip out and just go over the zip back and forth a few times to make sure it's secure. And finally, turn through, poke out the corners and pop in the cushion pad. Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please do give it a like and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos.